Hey everybody, and welcome back for another episode. Today, I kind of want to casually just tell you guys a little bit about my first year in Angular. So we'll go ahead right now and dive on in. All right, so I kind of reference this. I want this video to be a little more maybe vloggy. It's not typically my thing. A lot of the stuff that I've done in the past has been screen capture and writing code and doing examples and showing you how to build something. So I'm trying out something a little bit different where I've done a few of these before, but it's a pretty casual kind of vlog thing where I just kind of stream through, and I've got a few notes on my phone that I might check down a couple times. But just, I don't know, pretty casual, pretty laid back. Just kind of want to talk to you guys about my first year in Angular, the things just thoughts about it. Things I've learned, things I like, things I didn't like, things I want to see different maybe in the future. And that's really going to come down to 4 different things, and I'll probably have to check my notes again. But the Angular CLI that you can get with Angular, the TypeScript, use of TypeScript, which is really cool. This components architecture / mentality. I want to talk a little bit about the transition to that. And last one is just the automated testing setup that you get, and that's actually included from the Angular CLI. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'll probably just kind of ramble here, and we'll see where it goes, and then we'll put it out and see what you guys think. If you have any feedback on it, like this kind of thing, don't like it, let me know. Leave it in the comments, likes, subscribes, all that basic stuff. All right, so the first thing with Angular, I guess I want to give you guys a little bit of background on where I came and why I was using Angular, or why I'm using Angular now. And when I started my job that I have now, I came in on an AngularJS project, really ramped up on AngularJS. And at this point, I was really pretty new to web development, maybe only 6 months in, which is kind of hard to believe. And so we spent the time going through this project with AngularJS. And as we were kind of wrapping that up and moving on to a next project, we had a discussion as a team of where we wanted to go next. And at the time, it was Angular 2/4. And we kind of decided as a team, we want to go ahead and push the envelope to get ahead of the curve, not stick with AngularJS, but spend the time to learn Angular 2/4/ what's now 5. And a little bit of background for those of you who don't know, the transition from AngularJS to Angular 2 was a really rocky one, I guess is what you'd say. It was a completely different framework. It was kind of rewritten from scratch. Google made an attempt to, they needed to change a lot of things to get to where they wanted to be. And instead of really changing what they had, they went out and created the new framework, Angular 2. And the community, that was tough on them because it wasn't a transition at all. It was a completely different thing. The code wouldn't really carry over that much. And it was really just, again, learning all these new things to build an Angular application that they weren't doing with AngularJS. So all in all, Google really just made that jump and kind of put it in our hands to say, hey, you're going to have to do some new learnings, but you're going to like it when you get there. And I think that's where we ended up. So we looked at where we had been with AngularJS, decided to push forward with, it was really Angular 4 at that point, but it went from AngularJS to Angular 2 to 4 to now 5. And 6 will be out sometime. I don't know, sometime in the next year, I guess, and maybe sooner than that because I've heard some maybe alphas about it recently. Anyway, so we decided to go to Angular 4. I think a lot of us bought a course on Udemy where we spent a lot of time going through and just learning about it. And for you guys out there who haven't heard me preach about it before, I spend all my time on YouTube and Udemy taking courses and learning from other people. And that's really almost everything that I know web development wise was learned with one of those routes, either Udemy or YouTube, or just like building stuff, honestly. And building stuff is one of the ways that you'll learn the most, just having to do it. But anyway, so we bought courses on Udemy. We're going through those things and eventually kind of got through a successful project. And now we've since moved on to Angular 5, so we're really trying to stay on top of updates as they come out. So that's a little bit of the background, and now I guess kind of the learning section of stuff I wanted to talk about of my past year, because it's been almost a year since I started learning Angular. It's hard to believe it's only been a year because I feel like it's been a long time. So to start off with is the Angular CLI, and Angular CLI is something, I want to say it came out not initially when Angular 2 was released, but maybe sometime after. Maybe it was Angular 4, maybe a little bit before that, I'm not 100% sure. But Angular CLI is, gives you, see how best to explain this, gives you lots of things. It gives you a build system for your project, It gives you scaffolding to be able to generate files and classes and components and services and tests and all that kind of stuff. It sets up your testing framework, all the test files that you need, all the configuration you need to run your test. Let's see. So one of the things I think is really cool is the scaffolding part. And scaffolding, for those of you who don't know, is the ability in the terminal to say, hey, basically with a command, give me a new component or give me a new class or interface or something like that. And the CLI will go out and just create that file for you and tie it into the build system, so you don't really have to do anything. And I personally was a huge fan of the scaffolding in Ruby on Rails. I didn't like Ruby as a language. For what it's worth, it never resonated with me. It didn't really make much sense, honestly. People love it, but I didn't. But the scaffolding that Ruby on Rails had, where you can generate anything that you needed from the command line, staying in like a really tight architecture of how it should be done. So it's a very opinionated framework, but it gave you the tools to be able to follow their guidelines and follow that framework that they kind of best practices wanted people to use. And Angular CLI, again, not quite as strict, not quite as powerful either. I guess there's less. It's just a front end thing versus kind of a full stack framework like Ruby on Rails is. But the scaffolding is super cool. Generate classes, components, services, tests, all that kind of stuff. The other thing is the build system. So build system is having built-in support for a live development server, a live reloading development server. So as I save my files, it auto reloads in the browser. Super cool. If you're not doing that with the stuff that you work on, comment below. Let me know what you're working on, and I'll show you how to do it or where to go to do it, because it saves so much time. The small difference between saving a file, coming over to the browser, and clicking refresh, it's a hassle. It sucks. It's small, but doing it 100 times and in an hour, it gets really inefficient. So a live reloading server gives you the ability to build like a production build, to minify all of your stuff, to minify assets, to minify CSS and JavaScript, and ship out just the smallest bundle that you can for production. Your finished product should be as small as possible. Gives you support for configuration options for not just CSS, but Sass and SCSS as well, which is fantastic. So we're moving into SCSS. I'm relatively new to that. I've spent a lot of time watching videos and practicing in theory, but now I'm kind of getting into it myself, which is exciting. So there's so much built into Angular CLI. I think it's fantastic. I know that there's a similar thing for Vue and React, I believe, and I don't know a whole lot about either. I think React is create React app, which will give you kind of the initial scaffolding, and I think some scaffolding past that as well. And I think it includes a build system. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure. So if you guys have feedback, leave it. Let me know. And then Vue, I think it has Vue CLI, and I've got to keep, for some reason, I guess I need to plug my computer in because it keeps going black. So Vue CLI maybe is what it's called, but same general idea. If they give you a structure that you can follow and help take away some of the pain points of really just getting up and started. And again, I love Angular CLI. The one caveat I have is I wish I would have spent a little bit of time maybe setting stuff up without it before really diving into it. And the reason is it does so much for you. Like I think if you haven't really tried to set up all the things that it's doing, you have no idea what all it's actually doing for you. And it's extremely, extremely powerful. It's well thought out. It does all these things. But I think I dove in a little too quick to the Angular CLI and the scaffolding, to the point where now if I were to create a component, I would have to really think about, if I were creating it from scratch, I would really have to think about what goes into that component to actually make it be a component. Anyway, so for what it's worth, my suggestion in general is, as you take on new frameworks or libraries or whatever, try to take a look at its most basic use case and figure out for yourself how to connect things and how to set things up, and then move on to kind of a scaffolding or CLI type of thing, so that you really just have a good idea of what's going on. All right, so that's the Angular CLI, and everything after this kind of ties back into that as well. But the next thing is TypeScript, and through the Angular CLI and the configuration that it gives you the ability to run TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript that gives you strong typing, classes, interfaces, lots of different things that come with it. And what happens is your browser doesn't actually understand TypeScript. So Angular CLI sets up the transpilation process to transpile TypeScript into JavaScript that then the browser can read. So again, you don't have to worry about that configuration. It's taken care of for you with the CLI. But it's funny. One of the first things that I noticed, and this was in a college project, doing a really stupid, not good web application or web project homework assignment, really, was I was using Sublime, I guess, Sublime, and I realized you only got like IntelliSense, like if you I don't know, if you're typing a word and it auto completes it for you or it pops up IntelliSense with options, it only gave me stuff for things that I had already typed. And I was so used to, like in Java Eclipse or like Visual Studio C Sharp, it would tell me obviously the properties and the functions that I have available on a object, or auto complete the object where I can tab complete and go really fast and stuff. And honestly, that scared the hell out of me that I couldn't have that with JavaScript and Sublime. So that was, gosh, 6 years ago, I guess, 5 years ago maybe. And obviously things have come a long way. But with TypeScript, because it's strongly typed, if I define something as a string, for example, I can only put string values to it, can't turn it into a number. Number, same thing, can't put a string in it. Array you can define. So it gives you these strong typings that you know what kind of data you're working with. But you also get the flexibility of just raw JavaScript because you can define what's called an any. And it's basically the same thing as a JavaScript object. You can put anything in it. You can just dump whatever. Had to take a breath. I feel like this is actually going to take a lot longer than I thought it would. So the strong typing, the ability to have your classes and to get IntelliSense off of your classes in VS Code, other editors as well, I'm sure. But when I type out an object and do dot, I'll see the functions and the variables or properties I have access to on that object. It's kind of small stuff, but it's super, super useful. It gives you kind of error checking as you go. So, a lot of times with JavaScript, you don't find an error until you put it to the browser and it messes up, right? You can get a lot of that handled or taken care of. I've got to plug this thing in for my next video. You can take care of a lot of those things with TypeScript before you even get to the browser. So before it basically auto compiles every time you type, I guess. Every time things change, it kind of auto compiles and gives you some errors or warnings and things you need to look at before you can even put it to the browser. So it speeds up your development. It gives you kind of a safer development because you know what kind of data you're working with. You know what functions and properties and types of properties you're working with. Anyway, I'm a big fan. As an ex-Microsoft employee, it's cool to see something from Microsoft along with VS Code, TypeScript, take off and be kind of really accepted in the community, be built into Angular. I think you can kind of not hack, but you can kind of set up Vue and React to work with TypeScript. Actually, I'm sure you can because it's just a transpilation thing. But it takes configuration, and this stuff is built in with the Angular CLI. It takes care of all that stuff for you. You just get going using TypeScript, and you're in more of a Java/.NET C# environment that a lot of people are more used to and more comfortable with, and makes for honestly a much smoother transition to JavaScript in that realm. For me, going to JavaScript was like a very scary thing for a while. And now I feel super comfortable with it because I love it and I spend a lot of time with it. But TypeScript would certainly make that transition a lot easier. And it's something I would kind of advertise to people that are looking into web development. Is there's this option for stuff that's much more closer to what you're used to in C# and Java, but still gives you the ability to do all these cool things that web applications can do. All right, so that's TypeScript. Let's talk about, I think the next one is just a components architecture and this idea of what a component is. I think it's kind of a big transition from how I thought before, and I think it was a big transition to really embrace it from what people thought and how people architected things. I don't know. It's something I'm still kind of getting used to what a component is. And for those of you who maybe aren't into kind of components with React or Angular or anything yet, it's really this idea that, you break out your code or your application, these very small pieces that have as little dependency on each other as possible. That helps with testing. Talk about next, last topic. But you have this one component. Let's say you have a to-do application. You have a form with type in a name of your to-do, and then you have a submit button. Then you have a list of those to-dos that you've already created. So if you break that down into components, you might have a header thing at the top for navigation or just title or whatever it is. Have a form, a to-do form component. Then you'll have a to-do list component. And then inside of that, you'll have multiple to-do item components, for example. So you really break down your projects. It's very good for testing in terms of the dependencies between each other. You can set up a component, test it, and be pretty thorough about it, which is very handy. You can also think of it with, gosh, first time I'm kind of going blank here. You can think of it as, I don't know, just very simple pieces of an application, so that if I come in to work on something, I can work on a very specific small component and not be overwhelmed by this like really big project, right? Sometimes it's kind of hard when you get these big monolithic projects, is what people talk about. It's kind of hard to come in and see how things are connected, but when you break things out into these really small components, I don't know, it's easier to come in and just kind of work on that one thing and then figure out how to tie that thing into other stuff, which is really good. You talk about new developers, young developers, get this, make sure they didn't go to sleep on me. Young developers, new developers to a team, being able to come in and contribute with a small thing that really impacts the project is not an easy thing, but I think the components-based architecture kind of gets you a little closer there. Yeah, I think my mentality around components has actually gotten a little bit better since looking into React. Just for whatever reason, it makes a little more sense to me in React. React is, and I have a video on this coming out later, of it's just JavaScript, really. It's just modern JavaScript versus Angular has some stuff built in that's more Angular specific, I guess. There's more Angular things to learn than React seems to be. And so the idea of the component has kind of solidified itself a little bit in my head. But it's still something like, it's not an easy breakdown. One of the tough things is figuring out, yeah, you break these things down into these really tiny components, but then they need to talk to each other in a lot of cases, right? When you, in our to-do example, when you add a to-do from that form, you click submit, it needs to then be picked up by the to-do list component, right? So you have to put that one in there. So they need to talk to each other somehow. And there's all these different strategies of how they talk to each other, passing down things from, passing down properties basically from parent component to child component, passing things up from child to parent through basically a callback function. So a parent would say, hey, when you add an item, call this function that I'm giving you, which is the function he, she, it defined. And then that way it can handle the actual adding of the object to the array or to the database or whatever. So I don't know. It's kind of it's a different mentality. At its highest level, it's not difficult, but kind of really embracing a component architecture, and I don't know, taking advantage of it for what it's worth to the fullest is not as easy. It takes time, but again, I don't know. It's not that bad. And I think it is an exciting thing. I think it's kind of the right thing going forward. And you see in so many areas of technology really coming down to that sort of mentality that it's obviously kind of the future, and already is. It's already here. So the last thing here, and this is all configured by Angular CLI, is the automated testing. This is something I'd never done any automated testing before. I guess 6 months ago, decided, we should really throw some automated tests against this project to make sure things are obviously staying consistent. It's becoming a bigger and bigger deal internally for us. It's becoming a bigger and bigger deal just across the world, technology-wise and development-wise. So what Angular CLI gives you with testing, gives you unit testing with Jasmine. So you can, and each of these you can use kind of in their own area, but Jasmine is just defining unit tests. So it gives you the it condition. So it should generate this. It should show this component when I blah, whatever it is. And inside of that, you'll have your assertions to say, is this button visible? Is it hidden? Is this value 2 instead of 4 or whatever it is? And the most basic example of that is testing an add function. You'll see that a lot, and I'll probably do one of those coming up soon too. It's just you have a function, add takes in 2 parameters, A and B. I want to assert that I want to test that when I call add with 1 and 1, the result is 2. Pretty basic. So that's what Jasmine and just small unit tests. Karma gives you the ability to kind of basically wrap your unit tests to watch your test files as they change and then automatically rerun your tests. And then it pulls up this cool graphical interface in the browser to show what happened. It shows you how many tests passed, failed, and which tests passed and failed, a little bit of information about it. And that's super cool. I mean, again, going back to like the live development server, as your files change, the server changes, it updates, and then auto refreshes the browser. Super handy. I mean, if you're not using that, for real, comment, leave leave me a question. Let me know what you need to figure out how to get there or where you are, and I'll help you get there because it's super handy. So yeah, all that stuff is built into Angular CLI. If you use the CLI to generate a component, it'll generate a test file with it, and it'll include that test file. Actually, the test file just kind of gets included by default because of the build system for testing. But in general, it's gonna go a long way for application, not security in terms of like a security threat, but security in terms of knowing that your application isn't broken. And one of the things about component architecture, you might think that changing something in this component just changes it here, which ideally it should be, right? They should be pretty self-contained, but you never know what kind of impact it might have somewhere else. So you want to know, you want to have that set of unit tests that you can run to be able to verify that things are still okay. And the last part of that, and I haven't gotten into this yet, is Protractor for end-to-end testing. And this is the ability to kind of write out like, I guess kind of an interactive test where you say, hey, go type in this input, go click this button, go to this page, and it'll actually kind of run through and do those things. And I think it'll work, maybe not record a video, it'll take screenshots along the way to make sure things look the way that you expect, and you can let the test run. It'll actually open the browser, interact with the browser, and you can come back and see how everything went. So the end-to-end is really, it's basically simulating a user using your application as much as possible, which again, unit tests have definitely have importance to make sure that functionality-wise things work with each other, but integration tests where you're making sure components work with each other, and then your end-to-end testing, which is your most like realistic, real life, real world scenario thing where a user, the computer, is kind of going through your application and doing the things that you tell it to. I don't know. It's just fantastic that that's built into Angular CLI, and I think it's kind of the same thing with these other CLI. I guess create React app, not React app, and then I think it's Vue CLI, but I'm not 100% sure. It's got so much cool stuff in it. It takes care of so much stuff for you. Yeah, it's just great. So I think that's it for, just check here. That's kind of it for my overall thoughts. As a recap, it's only been a year that I've been doing Angular, coming from AngularJS, moving to Angular 4, moving then to Angular 5, and as Angular 6 comes out, we'll do some testing and make sure we can do that as well. By the way, the transition from 4 to 5, super simple. Didn't have any problems except for maybe one package that I had to relook at. Yeah, Angular CLI is fantastic. TypeScript, I love having the security of it. I go back to security, but the strong typing, the classes, the IntelliSense, the fact that it figures out things before you put it on a browser and realize it's an error, helps you out a lot. And again, still kind of wrapping my head around what a component architecture framework really means. But I mean, I'm pretty much there, I think. And then testing, super useful. It's going to save you at some point. I've already had like multiple cases where I run my unit tests after making a change, caught something, made a change again. And hopefully it's not something that we have to revisit, right? Because you got it there to run every time. So anyway, that's it. It's been a year in the Angular 4/5 world. It's been a lot of fun. We will continue down that route. In my personal time, I'm looking at React some more, and after this, we'll record a video on my initial thoughts within like 2 weeks of React and how it compares a little bit to Angular. But I just want to say thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you thought about the new format. I thought, every once in a while I want to throw in one of these kind of vlog ideas. I don't even know. Let's see. I'm up to 24 minutes. Not too bad. I guess this is really just my chance to get on here and just talk about stuff. So yeah, anyway, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Let me know what you think. If you guys like what you see, subscribe, leave comments. Reach out to me on Twitter. I want to hear from you guys. I want to do more stuff for you. But for that, I need you guys to talk to me and let me know what you want. So that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video.